These agreements will unlock over $18 billion of critical mineral projects in Canada, creating good careers for our workers and our builders, from lithium to aerospace and defense.
Well, you feel a great sense of unity. You know, the G7 was created about 50 years ago to provide a forum to discuss the important issue of the day amongst G7 ministers and leaders.
Something happened at the G7 in Paris that I genuinely wasn't prepared for, and I've been covering global economics for over a decade. Canada dropped an $18 billion power move that left every major economy scrambling to get on their side. And the twist? Trump's own trade war made it possible. What I'm about to show you will not sit easy. Subscribe first, then let's get into it. Let me paint you the picture of what's actually happening in the world right now. Because without this context, none of what Canada just did at the G7 in Paris makes complete sense. The global economy in 2026 is not just uncertain, it's fractured. Supply chains that took decades to build got ripped apart. The Iran conflict sent energy prices through the roof. Countries that used to rely on the US for economic leadership are now shopping around for a replacement. Every major economy sitting around that G7 table in Paris arrived with the same quiet desperation. Who can we actually count on? So who did the world turn to? Hint, it wasn't Washington.
I would say the nexus between food security, energy security, economic security, and I would even say to national security has never been clearer for colleagues. And in a world like that, obviously Canada stands out. Canada as an energy superpower, Canada as a trusted partner, Canada as a provider of long-term stability and predictability is certainly being seen as a partner of choice.
That right there, that's Canada's Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne, speaking at the G7 in Paris. Not boasting, not spinning, just stating what every other country in that room was already thinking. And here's what stings. Everything he described: stable partner, trusted supplier, long-term reliability. That used to be America's pitch. That was our lane. Trump didn't just vacate it, he torched it on the way out.
It is true when you're looking at conventional energy, whether it's about oil and gas and the recent developments we've seen in Canada, but also when it comes to nuclear and particularly also in critical minerals.
Nuclear, critical minerals, oil and gas. Canada isn't picking one lane, they're owning all of them simultaneously. While the Trump administration was busy using tariffs like a sledgehammer, Canada quietly positioned itself as the full-spectrum energy solution for the entire developed world. Partner of choice isn't a slogan, it's what happens when you show up prepared while someone else is busy picking fights. Now let's get into the number that broke my jaw when I first saw it. $18 billion. That's the value of critical mineral projects Canada has unlocked through agreements signed in a single year. 56 agreements. 10-plus countries, Panasonic, Eni from Italy, partners from Luxembourg, all signed on. And what makes this genuinely alarming from an American standpoint is this. Critical minerals aren't just rocks in the ground. They're the backbone of every battery, every defense system, every aerospace component the modern economy runs on. Whoever controls critical mineral supply chains controls the future. And right now, that's Canada.
In 1 year, we have signed 56 agreements on critical minerals with more than 10 countries because they know the world needs reliable partners in a dangerous world. And we know that entrepreneurs, such as those gathered here today, need predictability in the age of uncertainty. These agreements will unlock over $18 billion of critical mineral projects in Canada, creating good careers for our workers and our builders, from lithium to aerospace and defense.
Read that again. Predictability in the age of uncertainty. That's the exact opposite of what Trump's tariff policy delivered. When you slap tariffs on your closest neighbor and threaten to call them a 51st state, you don't get predictability. You get exactly what happened. Every country on earth started calling Ottawa instead of Washington. Trump wanted to pressure Canada into submission. Canada took that pressure and signed 56 deals with it.
This is a mine that's expected to generate nearly $2 billion for the economy, create 1,000 skilled careers from skilled trades to engineering. It will ramp up annual production to over 106,000 tons of natural graphite over 25 years. That is 8 times Canada's total graphite production right now.
8 times. 8. That Matawini graphite mine in Quebec isn't a project, it's a statement. Canada is not waiting around, not writing policy papers, not holding committee hearings. They are breaking ground on infrastructure that will feed global battery supply chains for the next quarter century. 1,000 jobs, $2 billion in economic output, 25 years of production locked in. Meanwhile, the only thing getting produced on the American side of this trade war is more uncertainty. Here's where it stops being just a trade story and starts being something much bigger. The world isn't just buying Canadian minerals, they're buying into Canada as a country. Foreign investment numbers don't lie, and what Canada posted recently is the kind of data point that should be setting off alarm bells in every American economic office, from Wall Street to the Treasury.
Foreign investment in Canada is at its highest level in 2 decades. It's running twice the rate of other G7 countries, including the U.S. Countries around the world are investing in Canada. AirAsia just announced the largest single order of the Canadian-designed aircraft in history. Canada and Quebec was there. Last week, Canada was ranked the most attractive market for infrastructure investment in the world.
Twice the rate of the United States, the most attractive infrastructure market on the planet, ranked above America. And AirAsia placing the single largest order ever for Canadian-designed aircraft. That's not a coincidence. That's a verdict. The global investment community looked at 2 options, made their calculation, and Canada won. Decisively. That's not a talking point. That's a scoreboard. And America is not on the winning side of it.
A lot of our colleagues in Asia, in particular, import a fair amount of food and a very large amount of energy. So for them, having a trusted partner like Canada is certainly welcome. They have seen the announcement made by the Prime Minister last week when it comes to our electricity strategy, when it comes to the MOU with Alberta, our approach to major projects.
Asia isn't calling Washington. They're calling Ottawa. And here's the gut punch that I keep coming back to. This didn't happen despite Trump's trade war. It happened because of it. Every tariff threat, every 51st state comment, every diplomatic insult pushed nervous allies one step closer to Canada's door. America didn't lose this ground to some master strategy by a foreign adversary. We lost it to our own policy choices. Canada just happened to be standing right there, ready, when the world came knocking. The trade story is one thing, but what Canada just did on defense, that's where this gets personal for me. Because Trump has spent the better part of this year publicly shaming Canada for not pulling its weight in NATO. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said it. Trump echoed it. The narrative from Washington was clear. Canada is a freeloader, a dependent, a country that hides behind American military muscle without paying the bill. Except here's the problem with that story. It's not true. And Canada just proved it, on record, with numbers that are impossible to argue with.
This is the first time since the fall of the Berlin Wall that Canada has achieved the NATO target. And those are not my words, those are the words of the Secretary General of NATO. By the end of this decade, we will have invested more than $80 billion in the defense sector.
The Secretary General of NATO, not Carney, not some Canadian spin doctor, the Secretary General himself, confirmed Canada hit the 2% target for the first time since the Berlin Wall came down. And they're not stopping there. $80 billion in defense investment by the end of this decade. That's not a pledge, that's a plan with a price tag already on it. Trump called Canada a burden. NATO called Canada a contributor. One of those voices actually runs the alliance.
I wouldn't overplay the importance of this. Where we have many aspects of very close defense cooperation with the United States, as you know, our closest defense cooperation. I'll give you the example of NORAD, and also put this in context of enormous investments that we're making in NORAD, over $40 billion that we're making in NORAD. $8 billion. One of the first announcements I made as Prime Minister was over $6.5 billion in what's called over-the-horizon radar in Nunavut, which helps protect in hypersonic missiles and others.
$40 billion into NORAD. $6.5 billion in hypersonic radar up in Nunavut. That's protection against the next generation of missile threats, built and funded by Canada. And here's the detail nobody in Washington wants to talk about. The U.S.-Canada Permanent Joint Board on Defense hasn't met a single time since the end of 2024. Not once. And the Trump administration just announced they're pausing participation in that board entirely. That board exists to protect North American soil, including American soil. So the real question is, who exactly is the freeloader here? Let's talk money, because the economic contrast between what Canada is doing and what's happening under Trump's policy decisions is the kind of thing that should be front-page news every single day, and somehow isn't. Canada walked into the G7 in Paris with a fiscal story so clean that two of the most respected financial institutions on the planet stopped to point at it. Not because Canada paid them to, because the numbers genuinely earned it.
There was a Wall Street Journal article today that says the fiscal discipline of Canada stands out. You heard the International Monetary Fund, so we have the strongest fiscal position. This is all good, but at the same time, affordability issues are top of mind. That's why we act.
The Wall Street Journal, the International Monetary Fund, both independently arriving at the same conclusion. Canada has the strongest fiscal position in the G7, not tied for first. Not honorable mention, strongest, period. And when Champagne says that's why we acted, he means Canada saw the pressure coming, saw their people struggling with energy costs and grocery bills, and moved fast. That's called governing. That's what it looks like when a country actually runs itself like it has something to protect.
We were able to reduce the deficit, projected deficit by 11 billion. And we said we had additional revenues of 7 billion coming. We used 2/3 of these additional revenues to support people because we understand that all these challenges that are affecting the world economy also have an impact on Canadians and on affordability. That's a point I raised today.
Canada cut its deficit by $11 billion and used 2/3 of the extra revenue to put money back into people's pockets. Fuel tax suspended. Grocery benefits delivered. Not promised. Delivered. Meanwhile, Trump's trade war has quietly added billions in costs to American households through tariff-driven price hikes that nobody in Washington will officially call what they are: a tax on Americans, paid by Americans. Canada is shrinking its deficit and helping its people at the same time. That combination used to be something we were proud to call American common sense. And here's where Canada isn't even close to finished. Every deal signed, every mine launched, every defense dollar committed, Champagne made it clear at the G7 that this is the opening chapter, not the climax. The window the Aya described as once in a lifetime is still open, and Canada is sprinting through it while Washington argues about who to blame next.
The fact that Canada is doubling down on our effort to build more capacity to support our allies both in Asia and in Europe is certainly welcome.
Doubling down. That's the phrase I want you to hold on to. While one side of this relationship has been throwing punches, the other side has been building. Quietly, methodically, without needing the spotlight. Canada walked into 2026 with a trade war on its hands and came out the other side as the world's most attractive investment market, the G7's strongest fiscal performer, and the partner every major economy in Asia and Europe is now betting on. I love this country, genuinely, deeply. That's exactly why this is so hard to watch. Canada didn't take America's seat at the table. Trump pushed back his own chair and walked away from it. And Canada, without making a single threat or throwing a single insult, simply sat down. The question I keep asking myself, and I want you to sit with this too, is not whether Canada is winning this moment. That's already settled. The real question is whether anyone in Washington is paying close enough attention to realize the game didn't just start. It's already well into the second half, and the scoreboard isn't close. If this analysis hit different for you, if you found yourself nodding, or frustrated, or just genuinely surprised by how much Canada has moved while we weren't watching, drop a comment below. Tell me what you think. And if you're not subscribed yet, do it now, because the story we just covered today, it's only going to get bigger from here.